Did you forget? So I said GAV is used by Maven to identify any plugin. Okay, until now it was trying to identify by the default. So, but now we are trying to give a specific plugin. So in that case, whatever plugin that you're going to use, you need to give the GAV. So you have to give a value just similar like this. So you will say group ID, some string or some name you will give, and then after this you will give the artifact ID of that particular plugin what you want to use. There will be some string for this also, and then finally what version of the plugin that you want to use. So that information will also give. Now all those things will be specific to the plugin what you give. So by giving this value, Maven will try to understand that okay, there is a plugin like this and I have to use this. So once this much is done, the next thing what you need to know is you need to set up a configuration. Okay, so when you say configuration, what will that contain? So configuration will have certain details like when you have to use the plugin and what the plugin has to do. Okay, so those kind of information again will be specified inside the plugin. So here within the configuration, you have to specify the values like specific to the plugin, what and all do you need. Like for example, if you have to do some specific action related to the action, there will be some values that you need to give and you have to specify for that. For example, if you are trying to execute a script, so for that plugin there might be some configuration specific to what is the executable you want to run, then from which directory you have to run this. Suppose if you want to take output of that, where will that be? So all those kind of information has to be specifically put into it. Or for example, if you want to run some parameters to those particular script, how will you give those parameters? So specific to that plugin, whatever some options that you have to give in order to run that task, you have to put into the configuration. Okay, so that will exactly tell what you have to do. But in addition, there are something called as goals or phase. Now you can say some phase of the life cycle, which means this will tell when you have to use the plugin, which means now calling a plugin in Maven can be two ways. That is, either you can call a plugin, attach it to a phase of the lifecycle, that is the default phase of the lifecycle, or you can call it directly. What is the difference between these two? If you see, the first thing, which means suppose if I give a phase and called it as compile, then whenever you enter Maven compile, what Maven is going to do is after the default behavior of your Maven compile phase, it will try to call this particular plugin, and in that plugin, whatever that you have asked it to do, it will take the necessary action. So if you don't give this here, what will happen? Maven doesn't know when it has to invoke it. So always a plugin will be associated to one of the phase of the lifecycle, that is compile, clean, or package, test, whatever that you're trying to do. So any specific plugin that you're going to use, which would be corresponding to a action, right? And that action will be as part of any one of the lifecycle steps. So what you need to do is you have to use this tag called phase and give that name of the default lifecycles phase along with this particular plugin will be called and it will be executing. Okay, now that is one of the standard way what you can do, but if you want, there is one more way of calling it, that is instead of attaching a plugin to a particular phase, I want to run only the plugin, then you can directly run it. Suppose if you want to directly run, then there has to be a goal associated to that plugin, because until now, if you remember, we were running a command called Maven and you were passing some option, right? So whatever option that you were passing, I told that it is the goal, wherein the goal is associated to a plugin. So in the same way, now it internally knows that when you say compile, where if you have installed the Maven in your place, you would have seen a config folder, right? So inside that config folder, it will have all the configurations to understand. If I say the goal is this compile, then goal called compile is associated to a particular plugin. So that is how it recognizes what is the default plugin that it has to call and it will be working. So in the same concept, now if you have to invoke this plugin directly, then we need to have a goal associated to it. So what we can do is we can create a goal and give the specific value. So I can say goals, and inside that I can say what is the goal name, and I can see give some string name here which will be used to recognize a goal. So now if I have to call this plugin directly without attaching to any phase of the life cycle, then I can use this goal in association with this plugin name. Okay, so that are the two ways that we can use a plugin. So I'll go deep into each one of them, how to do, but this is an overview what you should be knowing, because no matter what kind of plugins that you're going to use, it is always going to be in the same structure. That is, first you need to have a build tag. Inside the build tag, you should have a plugins. Why? Because anything that ends with S, that means you can have multiple instance of the same. Then within a tag called plugin, you will be defining all those values respect to plugin. So in the plugin, the first thing you need to say is what exactly is the plugin. So for that, you have to use the GAV of that particular plugin. And once you give that, Maven will understand that, okay, this is the plugin that I have to use. Then the second thing is you need to tell when you have to invoke the plugin. So either you can attach the plugin to a default phase of the lifecycle using this tag called phase. And when you do it, every time when you invoke that particular phase of the lifecycle, at the end, Maven will also call this plugin whatever you are associated with that particular phase of the lifecycle. Okay, suppose if you don't want to call along with any other step of the life cycle and you want to directly call this plugin without doing anything else, then you can specify goal, and through the goal we can call this plugin directly. Okay, so if you see exactly, there is one more tag called executions. So now all those things, whatever you give, will be within executions. In fact, this goals will also come inside executions. Now, what does execution means? Execution is going to tell you when exactly you're going to use and how exactly you're going to use. So you can give everything like this, wherein for each execution, you can specify what you want to have the configuration, what and all it is there. So for example, if you're trying to connect to an application server and you have to specify the GAV of that particular application server. Now, what and all will be the configuration you have to do for that particular application server. So first you need to know what is the application server, then where is it installed, and suppose if you want to deploy a file, then where it has to be deployed, if there is any username, password. So all those kind of details will come into configuration. The same thing if I said that if you want to execute a script, then what and all configuration values you have to give that is related to that particular command. So it is a script. So first you need to say what exactly is the executable, that is it's a shell or is it a Perl or a Python, whatever that you're interested. Then after that you have to specify what arguments that you're going to call and maybe from where you are calling. So like that, the values within the configuration will be varying between plugin to plugin, but whereas you will be using the same directory, sorry, same tag structure for all the plugins which you are going to additionally use in the Maven's project. Okay, so To understand it better, let's take one example and go through that example. Okay, so now the question might come. Okay, so you said something about plugin, you have to put a particular syntax. Now everything is fine. Now, what if the question comes to you saying that, how do you know what is the exact plugin to use? Because that is the one question that you know, okay, you said about plugin, but I don't know what plugin to use for what purpose. So for that, all you have to do is simply, okay, maybe I'll show you this. So you just search for a particular plugin and you will get that related plugin to it. So I'll say is, okay, now my interest is, maybe I'll show you an example of calling a ant script from Maven. Okay, so why do we need to do that? In your work, if you're working on a product which is running from more than 7 or 8 years, pretty much that would be running on Ant. If it is a Java-based project, definitely it would be running on Ant. But now, if you have worked, you will know that there's a lot of pain wherein you have to rewrite all the scripts, you have to modify many things, even there's a small change you have to do. So in those cases, what will happen is, how will you migrate your existing project from from Ant to Maven? So literally what you want to do is, you don't want to rewrite everything. So instead of that, you can just invoke the Ant script or whatever the Ant is going to do directly from Maven. Okay, so now that being the case, here you need to know what is the plugin associated with invoking a ant from Maven. So that is how you should be searching it, so that it's only in the beginning you will be wondering, but slowly as you work on to the plugins and keep working on, all you have to search is, if there is a new step you have to do, what is the corresponding Maven plugin that is going to be used for that particular task. So in the same way, now I am telling that I want to run some ant files and see. So what I'll do is, simply I'll say Maven ant plugin. Okay, so you go with the default value, whatever that it gives. And if you go inside it, it is going to give you the complete summary of how to use. So now if you click on this usage page, so it will give you what is the structure of the tag that you have to use. So it clearly says that, see, you will be having a project tag within which everything will be disclosed. Now inside that, whatever structure that we saw, it is the same thing what you're going to use. The only thing is, this is the place from where you will be copying the GAV of that particular plugin. So you will get all the information from the usage page of every plugin. Okay, so now if you see how this plugin has to be used, same thing what I said is, first you have to define a tag called build, then within build you have to give plugins so that you can have multiple reference of different plugins. Then all the details specific to a plugin will be given inside the tag called plugin. Okay, so the first and foremost thing what you need to specify is that GAV, because only through which Maven will be identifying what plugin that you are instructing Maven to use, right? So in that case, first thing you will specify is GAV. Okay, so you just copy paste this first, and once that is done, the next thing you have to say is executions, wherein executions define completely how the plugin has to be handled by Maven. Okay, so the syntax still remains the same, wherein first you have to use the tag called executions, and inside that you have to use execution. So why is the difference, or why do you need a S here rather than here, is that for the same project using the same plugin, I can do multiple things, right? It is not the only thing. If I want, I can run two separate scripts. If I want, I can run three separate scripts. Like that, you can do different types of executions, or I'll put in a simpler way in much more. So your aim is to deploy something or deploy a jar into application server. So you will use a plugin. Now using the same plugin, you have to connect to the database. Okay, that is the primary thing. After connecting, what and all do you think you can do using application server? Any guess? Hello, Vinay, Kumar, Hemant.
Yeah, yeah.
Any
Mm,
guess?
no idea.
Okay,
No.
no problem. So application servers are used to deploy a application, or you have a jar file you can deploy. But does it mean you can do only that? No, there are various other things which you can do. For example, if you can deploy, then you should also be able to undeploy, something like that. Right now, in addition, if you want to start that application server, even then you can start, or if you want to stop. So like that, using one application, I might be able to do different things. So in the same way, using the same plugin, you have to do different executions. So that is why you will give executions first, and then inside the executions you will create one more tag called execution, and within that you will be specifying all the values. That is, now I can create a plugin for application server. Then inside that executions, I will use one execution for deploy, and I can use one more execution for undeploy. So like this, I can have two executions. That is what it means. So wherever you see a S ending in the tags, then that means it is going to have multiple instances within the same project.
So inside execution, you will be for one task you'll be giving a phase, configuration, target. Then you'll close it again. For other tasks, you'll be again creating other execution tag, right?
Exactly. You don't worry about this part, but other than
Uh-huh.
that, this is the tag. I mean, this is the default tag you'll be using. That is built within that plugin. What plugin is that? And for that plugin, how you are going to connect, what it has to do, when it has to run, all those things will be given within execution. Okay, wherein if you want to do multiple things with the same plugin, then you can use this execution differently. Wherein for each execution, you need to specify a phase through which it has to connect, and then you need to specify a configuration tag which will have the values which you exactly want that plugin to do. So this will be changing from plugin to plugin. So like I said, in Ant, we have a concept called target. So any information that you want to pass to Ant is through something called target. Now, the same thing if you wanted to run some shell script or Perl script, the configuration values is different. So what and all do you need to give the configuration value? Like I said, what is the executable? From where you want to run? What are the parameters that you want to pass? So those kind of informations will be given for a script plugin, right? So like that, the configuration internal value will be changing from plugin to plugin, whereas the syntax will remain same. Okay. Now, once you have done, I said that suppose if you want to attach this plugin to a phase of the lifecycle, then you use this. If not, you can use this goal, and using this goal, you can directly call. Now, instead of calling Maven compile, I can say Maven run, but it needs to know what exactly run is associated, right? Then you will be using a specific syntax from the plugin. Then we will say colon from that, and it will call this plugin. So I'll tell you this particular part when I'm executing directly. But unless and until, what I'm trying to say is other ways,
So when we are give,
yeah.
I'm sorry. So when we are giving goal, we don't need to give face, right?
Yeah. So it's not like you are not required to give. If you give or not, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. But if you have given face, then there is no need for to use goal, because it will never go to the goal. So goal is used when you want directly to access this plugin. So instead of accessing directly, if you just say phase and attach it to a particular phase, then Maven will not even read it. Why? Because you have not used it directly, whereas you have attached it to a phase. So it is like that. It doesn't matter if you are giving, how you are going to use it is what is important. Getting it? Hello?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so now we saw this much, right? So now this is what it is going to do. So now if you see specific to ant,
Adam,
yes.
so sorry to stop you. What is the goal is doing? It's directly
Okay, I'll explain you what it is. Now we invoked, what is this we are doing actually?
packaging. Yeah.
No, no, what is this? It is packaging, I know. But what do you call this in Maven term?
Yeah, this is goal.
So exactly. So when you are invoking Maven, you can invoke like this. Okay. So what is this goal? This goal by it will be a default phase of the lifecycle and through which it knows what plugin you have to call. Now, if you are calling some specific plugin, and for that you have to create a goal like this. Now instead of calling it directly, sorry, instead of attaching it to a phase, if I want to call this plugin directly, then how will I call? So I will say run goal for this plugin, right? So I will say mvn run like
Mhm.
this. Okay, now still, it is not clear for Maven because you are just saying run. It will search for all the default plugins, and for that, if it has a run, it will use. So instead of that, whenever you are using this, there is one more way of specifying, that is you have to give the short name of a plugin and a goal associated to it. Okay, so now if you specify like this, what Maven will do is it will go and check whether this plugin is installed or it has been defined in your pom.xml, and in that pom.xml as a goal associated to what you have specified is present here, then it will come and execute it. So now how do you know that? So this is how you can get it. So now if you see, it is using a default goal called run. That is what we will be specifying, and the short name for this particular plugin is ant run. So now if you, instead of saying like this, if I say ant run and run, what it will do, it will directly come and call this plugin, and it will not do any other task which Maven will do. Okay, so we'll see how that is also going to happen. So now I have one example where I am going to call a ant, whereas I'm not interested to do anything from the ant because it will be too confusing for you if I show how to compile. But my goal, what I have to do is assume that I have something which I have to do with ant. So now, like I said, this scenario will happen whenever you have an older project in ant and you want to just migrate to Maven, which means you are not actually migrating, you are just invoking ant from Maven. Okay, so that could be one simple scenario. So now my requirement is I need to run a ant task or a ant command from my Maven. Okay, so for that, what is the plugin that we are going to use? We are going to use this plugin called Apache Maven plugin. Okay, so now I copy pasted all those things what you saw from there. Okay, I have copied this already from that page, but I have done little modification. So let's see what and all are those modification. Okay, so I just give this tag somewhere which is in free space. Okay, so the first thing what I've done is, so we have used the same syntax of the tag plugins, then plugin. So inside that, the first thing we need to give is the GAV. So which we have copied from there, I've given it. Okay, so once that is done, the next thing what I have to do is give the executions. So I have give the execution tag, within that execution is done. Okay, you don't worry about this ID, it is just a quick way of identifying it. Even if you don't give, it will work. So what is now the important thing is, we have specified the plugin. Now we need to say when it has to be invoked and how it has to be invoked and what it has to exactly do. So for that, now if I want, I can directly define this phase, and here I have given it as clean. So what does this mean clean is whenever we invoke going forward Maven clean along with the default behavior, it will call this plugin also. Okay, so that is one way of doing. Suppose if you don't want to call this clean and you want to run the plugin directly, then you have to associate it with this goal so that when I call this command and run colon run, it will directly call this plugin and it will not do any other step. So like that, I have defined both the things. Okay, so this tells when this plugin has to be invoked. Okay, so you have specified what is the plugin, when it has to be invoked. Now the next thing you have to specify it, what exactly it has to do. So that will be specified inside a tag called configuration. Okay, now what and all will be the values of configuration. Now that is what will be varying from plugin to plugin. So here if you see, since we are using a ant plugin, you have to use the configuration values related to ant. Okay, now so that values will be changing from place to place. Now we don't have to really worry about it. So just for the practice, what I'm doing is I am just trying to print some message. Okay, so I'll say I'm using ant plugin from Maven. Okay, so now this is what we are doing. So now when it comes to the configuration, so any information that you pass to the ant, not to the plugin. So internally this plugin will be calling a ant executable, right? Or a ant binary. Now when you are calling the ant binary, how do you specify an instruction to it is through something called as tasks. Now this is the syntax which you have to use in ant. Suppose if you are using ant, you have to use the same syntax for that ant. Now I have given the same configuration in this, wherein tasks is nothing but what exactly ant has to do, and in that what exactly ant has to do is going to print this. That is what we use a task called echo, which is going to print some statement what you're going to give. And this is what the plugin is going to do when I am going to call this phase called clean. Okay, so clear with this? Structure, GAV, execution, which defines when you have to call, and then the configuration specifies what exactly you have to do. So we will see other plugins also wherein you will see what is the different configuration that you will use. So any configuration values that you don't know, you can always go to this page and it will give you all the different kinds of configurations that you have to use. Okay, now here we have done with the setup, simple setup. Now if I just say Maven clean, now see what is it going to do. Okay, do you see it has called that? No, what happened? Maven clean. Is it printing somewhere? Hmm. Okay, sorry. Actually, we are in demo and this is inside demo 2 folder. Okay, for simplicity, I'll print. Okay, okay. Now I'll run this. Okay, so see what is that first done? First, it is doing its default behavior, that is, it is calling the plugin associated with this goal. So whatever this has to do, that is basically delete all the runtime files, it would have completed its tasks. And once it is completed, then it is trying to call the plugin which you have specified. And see how it is calling? It is calling using your GAV what you have used, and it is just internally using a reference which you have given. So if you have not given, even then it will work. Now in that, what exactly it has to do, you have just given some echo command to run through, and that is what it is trying to print, wherein it is not mandatory that you should be giving only this. You can give any other phase, wherein only that phase will be able to call this. So now if I say clean, it will not be calling. Why? Because you have not associated that particular plugin with clean face, because now I changed it to compile. So now if you want to call it, if I say Maven compile, only when whatever value that you have given is comparing with the face what you have given for plugin, it is going to call at the end. See, after its default behavior, whatever it has done, it will be calling your plugin specifically and it will run. So either you can do it or you can call it directly. So like this, you can choose when you want to run and when you don't want to run. So preferably when you are using a phase, do not use anything specific to goal. Okay, it will work, but sometimes it is not the right behavior it will work. So always when you are using a phase, then use only the phase. So I'll tell you in couple of other examples wherein without giving the phase, how will you call a goal directly? So now if you see, if I give a phase here, then every time I call this phase or this goal of a Maven, then along with the default behavior, it is going to call this plugin. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
So always goal is not mandatory, right? I mean,
If it is a default lifecycle of the phase, oh sorry, here you are saying goal.
yes, yes.
Yes, it is not mandatory. If you give phase, you don't need to give goal.
Okay, okay, fine.
Okay, now let me take one more example. So now I saw one plugin for ant run. So let me put one very simple example for showing. Now, suppose if you want to run this command, okay, take this very simple command. If you want to run this, how will you run? Now, if you see what is that you're trying to do, you are trying to run Maven. So if you take from the OS, what is this? It is nothing but a executable plugin, right? So all you have to do is search if Maven has any executable plugin, or does Maven has a plugin to execute or to call a executable. So in that case, if you search in that way, you will find plugin for that also. So if you just simply say Maven, see, as soon as you type, it is giving some plugin. So if you go to this, there is a plugin called exec plugin, and it is used to call a executable through plugin. And if you want to see how to use, just go to the usage page and you see you will be giving the same structure what is giving, that is build plugin, and then you have to give the specific group ID. Now this will give you always the latest version which is available. Suppose if you want to use any older version, you can change the value, but other than that you can copy paste the existing one, or a developer will tell you that he is interested to call a particular version of a plugin. Okay, so based on that you can specify the version. So once that is done, here you can specify a goal, or you can specify the execution, which is going to say when and how you are going to call. So where if you give a face, it will be attaching it to the face. If you don't give a face and if you directly give a goal, then what you can do is you can directly call this plugin using this goal. Okay, so after that, the important thing next is configuration. Now wherein the configuration for this plugin is different. Why? Because here you are trying to do what you are trying to call a executable. So in that cases, what and all are the values that you have to give for the configuration? First thing is you need to say exactly what is the executable. Okay, then what is that you have to give? You need to say what is the working directory from which you want to call this executable, and then suppose if you have any arguments to be passed, then you will give it within a tag called arguments and give multiple argument. So again, as I said, why is that you have a SC here? Because you can pass multiple arguments, right? So in those cases, when you want to pass multiple arguments, then simply you can use a parent tag called arguments, and within that, each argument tag will have one value. Okay, so now this way you can still do, but there is one more way of calling this plugin. Now, say that you don't want to specify a goal name. Okay, still it is mandatory. Suppose if you don't even give any goal, then what you have to do is by default, the plugin itself will give you some goal name. So if you use this goal name, then directly it is going to call. Like I was saying as example for your application server, I said using the same application server, the same plugin, you can do a deploy, you can do a undeploy, like you can start the service, stop the service, all those things. Now for that, either you can define one plugin, sorry, one goal name, or it would default give you some particular goal name associated to it so that it knows exactly what action it has to perform, so that you don't have to worry instructing all those information. Okay, so that is one more advantage of using plugins, where it is customizable and it can, you know, intelligently do certain tasks. So now going back to the same example what I said, now let us try to run the same task in a simple way. So now what is that I am trying to do, or what is that we are trying to do? We are just trying to get a version of Maven, or simply we are trying to execute one command or an executable and run it along with a Maven. Okay, so now what is that I'm trying to do? I am trying to add one more plugin. So now since this is a second plugin, we have to give it within the plugin tag, and the plugin tag has to be given within the plugins tag. Why? Because this is a second definition, or this is a second plugin what I'm using it for my project, right? So like that, you have to keep all the plugin values within a plugin tag only, so that it will be clear for us to understand that this is a separate plugin and all those details will be associated. Okay, so now if you see, this is a plugin tag which is going to define a specific value. Okay, now for this plugin, what and all is there? First thing I have to say, what is the GAV of that plugin? Okay, I have done. Then if you see, I have not specified a phase here. Okay, that means I am not interested to attach this plugin to any phase, which means if I have to invoke, I can invoke it directly. Okay, that is done. Second thing is, as Kumar was asking, do I have to give a goal? No. If I give a goal, then I will be calling it specifically with name. Suppose if I don't use that goal or any standard name here, then I can use the default goal, whatever the Maven is going to give. Okay, so that is always a best standard, because you will always be remembering this, because once you start using Maven, you will be using the same thing for different plugins for different projects. So whenever you have to call a particular plugin for execution, then you should be simply remembering, okay, this is the command, so that I will call. Because one use or the advantage of Maven, what we saw from the first class, is reusability. So simply if I copy paste this and change only the different values here, then I can configure it to a different project, right? So in that way, instead of giving a specific value here or hard coding it to a project, we can make it generic. So that is why it is a good practice, whenever you are invoking a plugin directly, don't give a goal name, so that you can use the standard goal name given by the Maven. Okay, so now in that case, the only thing what we need to say is what exactly this plugin is going to do. So in that case, configuration tag is what is important, and you need to define all this value. So now the configuration specific to this plugin is different from this. Why? Because this plugin is used to call a executable. So in that case, what and all is required for our case? Like I said, I need to specify what is the executable. Okay. Once you have specified the executable, do you need to pass some arguments? If you have to pass some arguments, then you just specify what arguments that you have to pass within the task, so that you can give multiple values or multiple arguments into this. So like this, you can give any specific value. So either you can give the complete path of this executable, or if you just give this much, what will the OS will do? The OS will take the default value of the path where you have given. From there, it will think, okay, I know this Maven is executable, and this Maven will be calling this executable once again. Okay, so now, like I said, how do you invoke this plugin? I can directly use this goal called exe, and the plugin or the short name for the plugin associated to this plugin is exec. So now if I come here and simply say exec. Okay, so okay, it is saying it cannot find Maven. Why? Because it is not able to find the complete executable path. Okay, no problem. Let me give Git itself. Let me check if Git works. Okay, so I'm getting some output, right? So let me try the same thing now. Okay, see here, it works. So what I'm trying to do is Maven is going to call this plugin where it is a exe. So what is it going to do? It is going to create one more process internally if you're thinking from the OS. So in that, what it is going to do is it is trying to call a executable called Git, and since Git is recognizable by the operating system, because I have added the Git to my path variable, it easily identifies. In case if it is not identifying, then you need to give the complete path of the executable where it is running, or you switch to the directory. So you had an option here, right? You can specify from where you have to run this particular executable. So it will run this executable from this working directory and not in the directory where you are currently present. So like this, you can specify options based on what is your need, and you can call. So now if you see, even though you have multiple plugins, we have not called anything else, and we have just executed only a particular plugin. Okay, so like this, based on what is the interest or multiple plugins you have, you can always specifically give the values. Now, majority of the times, whatever plugin that you're going to use will be specified by the development team, or in majority you will be using exe plugin and plugin only. But anything in addition, all you have to remember is what is that you're trying to do, and for that quickly search in the Maven page, is there a plugin associated to it? And once it is there, like I said, the syntax is going to be the same, wherein only values it will be changing is the GAV will be changing. Then based on your need, you will specify the phase, and after that, the main thing what you have to give is the configuration. Okay, so one more example what we will see is we will try to connect to application server and try to deploy. Okay, so I'll show you in the next class how to do it when we are explaining deployment. Okay, so but what you have to understand is the syntax is going to be the same no matter what plugin you have to use. The only difference would be the GAV of the plugin, what phase that you're associating, that depends on kind of plugin that you're using, and specifically the configuration value. So that is what will be changing from plugin to plugin. But other than that, given any point of time, the syntax is going to be the same. Are you getting it?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Vinay, Hemant, any doubt?
Yes, Adam. Yeah. No, that should be good. Yeah.
Okay. Now, so this is use case of a plugin. Okay. Now, let me put it up in one more way. Now what will happen? Suppose if you take a plugin, sorry, just a minute. Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
so now we were seeing plugins and we are using. Now what will happen in this scenario? If you see, every time if I attach some phase, it will always be calling it, right? Now, do you think of a scenario where sometimes you want to attach it like this and sometimes you don't want to attach it? Do you think there will be some scenario that it might happen?
Yes.
Pretty much it might happen. Yeah. So one example, okay. Do you think of any such scenario, anything that comes to your mind where you can use it like that?
So sometimes you need to clean the, you need the old builds where you'll be using for the present build. So you don't use a clean option over there.
Yeah. So I can, that is also the right way, but to give on one specific example, take in the production, say, like I said, you wanted to do some task like deployment. Okay. So
Okay.
as part of the build, you wanted to deploy it somewhere. Okay. Now, in order to give, what will you give? You will give some application servers detail, right? So like this, I will create the GAV for one plugin for deployment, that is application server. And in the configuration, I will give all the values of the specific server. Like say that I connect to a JBoss server. I will give all the values like where is the JBoss installed, what and all values that you have to pass, like what jar that you have to deploy, all these values I will give it here. Okay. Now, every time you call the deploy phase or the deploy goal, Maven will be calling that particular plugin, correct? Okay. Now, say that that is used only for production. Okay. Now, for some scenario, you want to add a different application server for testing purpose. Okay, now what will you do? You have to do one simple thing. What you can think of is you will create one more plugin and you will add that specifications for that particular application server. Now, what if even that is the same JBoss? Then yeah, one simple thing you can say is I will create one more execution and I will give the specific value for that. Okay, that can happen. Now, if you are invoking, the commands will vary, which means you have to give different goals. Again, it will be a little confusing to use the same plugin for doing different tasks. That is one for testing, one for production. So in that case, what you can do is if you want, you should be invoking it, and if you don't want, you should not be invoking it. Which means I can write it as a separate plugin and put it in a simple way that if I want, I should be able to call this plugin, attach it to the lifecycle. If not, I should not be doing. Now, let me take back the same example what I have shown here. Now, I'll tell you one simple same scenario like what I said in production. If I want, I should be able to use it. If not, I should not be able to use the same thing here. For testing purpose, I want to call this plugin whenever I call compile. Okay, but when I go to the production, I should not be calling this. Now, how can we do that? Because if we have specified like this, every time when I call compile, it is going to call this. Now, how can I prevent in that way? So if you think from that, then Maven gives the option called profiles. So it is not the command line option. It is a option from the configuration where we call it as profiles. So what does you get into your thought by understanding well, when you hear about profile? So what do you generally understand by the word profile?
Profile is a set of users who having a specific, the role. You can say the testers. You can say the kind of people what they are having.
Or an identification.
Okay. Yeah, still, what is the exact one? So profile is something you give certain values only for something specific, right? Not to generic. So you have a profile, I have a profile. Take a Facebook profiles. So what do you mean by your Facebook profile and my Facebook profile? So it is the same page given to both of us. You put in whatever you need, whereas in my page or my profile, I'll put whatever I need. So that might be from a server or anything. Profile stands in that. So if you go in a general terms, profiles are nothing but configuration specific to a need. So in the same way, now in Maven, we can use profiles for which you can give a set of configuration value to only for a profile, and you can invoke a profile whenever you want, and if you don't want, you don't have to invoke a profile. That means for the same values what you have given here, I can simply put it as a profile wherein only when I invoke the profile, and in the profile if I call this phase called compile, then it will be calling. So instead of invoking this profile, if I directly call compile, then it will not be calling, because calling a profile will bring the configuration value, whatever you have defined in that profile, to the Maven's runtime. So if you want to know how do you put a profile, it is very simple. All you have to use is, once again, use a tag called profile, and you, yeah, so if you have already defined plugin, all you have to do is create a profiles tag. Why is profiles? That means for this project you can have multiple profiles. So I can create a tag called profile, and inside that profile I can specify all your plugin. Okay, now wherein how do you identify this plugin is using some tag called ID, so that whenever you are passing this profile name to the Maven, only then Maven will go inside and it will read all this value. Okay, so now as a syntax, what we have to do is we have to close the profile. Okay, so what I did, I just added something called profiles on top of this plugins, whatever we have defined, and here I just gave one reference called ID. So what it means is, now whenever I invoke Maven, only if I tell to Maven to use this profile, then it will come and read all those things, whatever you have specified inside it. So in case if you're not giving this profile, then Maven will never use the configuration, whatever you have done. Okay, so now see the same example. So now if I say Maven compile, it is not calling anything. Why? Because it is the same thing Maven is trying to run, but since you have put it as a profile, it is not going to use, because you are not informing Maven to use that profile. So unless and until you don't say to the Maven to use this profile, it will not use. Okay, now how will you instruct Maven to use a particular profile? That is, read the configuration. It is not mandatory that whatever that you give Maven should be running. You are just specifying to Maven that whenever you run, you also consider to look into this code what we have written here. Okay, that is the simple meaning of that. So now how do I invoke a profile, or how do I ask Maven to read the lines what we have put inside this profile, is by using an option called -p. Okay, so capital P means invoking a profile, and for that you need to specify the profile name. So that is what we have given it using the ID here. So you just give some small string through which you can identify it. So now if I just say test, see what it does. See, it has invoked. Why is it? Because when it is trying to run this, even before running, the first thing what it does is it generates the resources and all those things, right? While doing it, it will go through your POM file and it will say that, okay, I see there is a profile called test, and what I have to do is I have to read everything. So it will read and keep in its memory. Now, when it is in the memory, you are saying that calling compile. So now it knows that, oh, okay, there is one more plugin which is associated to the face, so I have to call it. So in case if you have not invoked this in the profile, then it will not be stored in the Maven's runtime memory, so it will not know anything about this plugin. So this is how, if you want, you can use a plugin, and if you don't want, you can go with the default behavior. Again, what will happen if I say like this? So I am calling a different phase, and in that different phase, I am calling this profile, but it is still not doing anything. Why is it? It is because, like I said, when you are invoking Maven with this profile, it will keep all this code into the memory. And now when you have called the phase as clean, it is going to check whether there is anything related to clean. So even though you have invoked the profile, there is nothing to be used because the phase what you have called as clean, and it is nowhere specified anywhere in this particular code of line. So that is why it is not doing anything. So it is simply no use of giving it. But even if you give, unless and until you have to internally specify, it will not call. But if you have specified something like compile, then if it has associated, it will use. So simply maybe from an interview point of question or from a normal use case, if you want to use a plugin only when you want, then you put it inside a profile and use. Suppose if you don't want for some testing purpose or something else, and you want to go with only the default behavior, then don't call the profile and then only call the particular phase, so that profile gives you an option of setting a configuration and specifying it to Maven when you want to use and when you don't want to use. Are you getting it?
Yes.
Kumar, Hemant?